Von Hafen. I represent District 36 in the North Carolina House. I'm from here in Wake County, and I have with me tonight Senator Natasha Marcus, who's senator from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area, and I'll have her introduce herself in a minute, as well as Carol Jenkins, the president of the ERA Coalition, and Jimmy Cochran-Pratt, the co-president of the North Carolina ERA Alliance. And they'll talk a little bit more about themselves and their background, so I won't go into all that right now. But I just wanted to, again, welcome you. This town hall, when we decided to plan it, we picked a date right before our legislative session was going to start, and we really had no idea that this was going to be such a very exciting day for the Equal Rights Amendment. And Carol will fill us a little bit more in on what's happening on the federal level with the amendment. But the reason that we wanted to do this was because our North Carolina General Assembly legislative session began on the 12th, but we are not allowed to file any bills in the General Assembly until this coming Wednesday, the 27th. And myself, along with 3 of my House colleagues, Representatives Fisher, Cunningham, and Terry, will be filing the ERA ratification bill in the House. And Senator Marcus, Senator Fushi, and Senator Natalie Murdoch from Durham will be filing the bill in the Senate on the very first day of our legislative session. So we thought it was really important to make sure that everyone understands what the Equal Rights Amendment is all about and why we keep pushing it so hard. I mean, it's like this bill has actually been around since 1923. I don't know if a lot of you realize that, but we mostly hear about the ERA from the 1970s and the fight over equal rights in the 70s. And then it's become more in the news lately because there's been a renewed push to have 38 states ratify the bill. And in 2019, Virginia finally became the 38th state to do that. Now, a lot of people ask, why are you still trying to do it in North Carolina? You already have the 38 states that you need. And honestly, for me, as a legislator, I feel like it's really important to still pushing this bill here in North Carolina to make sure that all women know that we value their constitutional right to equality, and that it's really important for us as a body to reaffirm that right for women. There's also, of course, Carol will probably talk about this, but there has been some states who have been wanting to pull back their ratification or rescind their ratification. So we want to make sure that we have all the states that we need when it's time for the bill to be, for the amendment to be ratified to the federal Constitution. So we're going to keep pushing, and I'm so excited to have so many people here tonight to learn more about it and what you can do to help us in that effort. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Senator Marcus to introduce herself and say a few welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Julie. Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Marcus, Senator for District 41 here in Mecklenburg County. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today. Proud to be one of the 3 primary sponsors for the ERA in the North Carolina Senate this year. A little bit about me that helps inform why I care so much about this issue is I am a mother of 2 daughters. They're both on the precipice of joining the workforce and adulthood and hopefully parenthood and all the demands that accompany those life changes ahead. And I want them to know that they have rights that are equal to their male counterparts. I don't think that's asking too much, certainly not in 2021. Ruth Bader Ginsburg fought her entire life for this. It's a disappointment to me we couldn't get this done before she passed. But certainly this year, we should be able to get this done. And I've personally worked in male-dominated fields most of my adult life. I worked in a private law firm, and now, of course, my current job is a North Carolina legislator and candidate for office. So, as many similarly situated women do, I always try to rise to the occasion and claim my earned space in the hierarchy of this male-dominated world that I live in. But it is disheartening to know that a majority of the people in charge of my workplace, and let's be honest, most of them are men, have for decades denied women like me, like you, like my daughters, and all our fellow American women the basic protections that the ERA would grant us. They've put us off time after time after time, sometimes without even the respect of having a conversation with us about why they won't hear it, and instead have allowed the Constitution remain as it is, which, let's face it, it's incomplete. There is a huge gap in protection against discrimination on the basis of sex. The Constitution in the 14th Amendment protects discrimination based on race, religion, national origin, but not on the basis of sex. It's a massive hole and we have to fix it. And that's what the ERA will do. So I would also submit to you and to the folks who are the leaders in the North Carolina General Assembly that passage of the ERA, it's not risky. It's not even really brave or groundbreaking because it's already happened in 38 other states. So it's not it is an idea that has been popular since it was included in the platform of both political parties back in the 1940s. That's when the Beatles were born. That's when the Slinky was invented. It was popular when it passed Congress with bipartisan support in 1972. I will remind you, for those of you who might not know or remember, that gas cost 55 cents a gallon then, and the country was pretty divided because we were mired in the Watergate scandal at that time. And yet the ERA passed then. So North Carolina's position against the ERA is now clearly the minority position. It's shared by only 11 other states in the nation. So come on, North Carolina. We've amended the Constitution many other times in the past, and surely this is worth as much as all those causes were. We need an amendment. And we need the leaders in the General Assembly to break free from this inertia of disinterest and distrust that they have shown in the ERA and in its proponents, like all of us on the panel tonight, and hopefully all of you and people all across the state who want us to step into this opportunity and do the right thing and join the 38 other states that have already pledged their support for the simple truth that discrimination based on sex is outdated, it's wrong, it's un-American. Women in this country are right to demand that our equality be spelled out in the US Constitution. That's what we're asking for today. That's what we're seeking. And we hope that people in positions of power here in our state will finally see fit to join us. So those are my remarks. I am so excited and honored to get to introduce you to Carol Jenkins, who is going to speak to you. She is on the national level fighting for this fight for all of us. She's an advocate for human, civil, and women's rights, an award-winning author, an Emmy-winning former television journalist. We love journalists. Third pillar of our democracy, and she is the president and CEO of the ERA Coalition and the Fund for Women's Equality. They're fighting for the ERA and for all of our rights. We're so honored to have Carol with us tonight to answer your questions, tell you about the whole history of the ERA and why it's so important. So thank you for being here, Carol. It's all yours.
Senator, thank you so much. And Julie, too. It's a pleasure, a very, very much of a pleasure. I've been in North Carolina, you know, with Marina and Lori and Jimmy and the work that, you know, that they're doing as coalition members. Admire the hard, persistent work with such great ideas of, you know, innovating ways to convince people, because we still have to convince people that we need the Equal Rights Amendment and women need equal rights in this country. Believe it or not, there are a few people who still disagree with us, but not so many as there have been. I will say that today we had a terrific day in the United States Congress with both the Senate and the House declaring their support of the time removal bills that they have in both the Senate and in the House of Representatives. Jackie Speer and Tom Reed, bipartisan, introduced their bill with almost 200 co-sponsors. The senators announced that they're introducing it and have had a snafu, as we've been talking with them this afternoon, mostly because of the assault on the Capitol that we had on January 6th. So they still have not fully recovered in terms of being able to actually put the legislation in, but they've announced it as the first legislation that they want to be recognized for in the 117th Congress. That's huge. And we have an administration Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have both expressed their support, their commitment in their women's agenda, and personally, as they were both campaigning, that in fact they want to see the Equal Rights Amendment happen. And, we like to say, in our community and in this movement is that, we now say Joe, although we can't really call him Joe anymore, Sir President. Can you just give the archivist a phone call and tell him to publish the ERA? It's not quite that simple, but it's perhaps the easiest thing that's possible now in the Biden administration with a brand new Department of Justice. The previous administration was not so thrilled about the concept of the Equal Rights Amendment, but this new amendment administration is fully on board. And we have court cases, as you know, as I'll talk a little bit about this, when the archivist, the head librarian, we do have sympathy for him. Can you imagine being the head librarian and now you have millions of women furious with you because you have not published the Equal Rights Amendment? And his response has been, but, the Department of Justice told me I shouldn't, I can't, that's my boss, and I'll wait for a court case. So we now have the court cases. The attorneys general of the last 3 states to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment have sued to compel the archivist to do his job. So that there are, on every level, the public is with us. Our research that we did early on show that overwhelmingly America is ready to give women equal rights, equality. The Pew organization, respected, had the numbers and skyrocketing for Pew, upper 80s in terms of support. No matter what the political party, no matter what the race, no matter what the age, income, everybody gets it now that women deserve equality. We just have to get that last step, and we do firmly believe that 2021 is the year of the ERA. I have many people who ask me 2 things. One thing is, can you just give me the short version of the ERA? And I always have to laugh and say, my friend, there is no short version of the ERA. We've been at this for 100 years, practically. Shy a couple of years, and we're hoping we don't have to wait for the full 100 years, for everybody to give us parades and accolades and all of that. We'll take it, as we had to do for the vote. We will take it now. Alice Paul introduced it in 1923. We have been working at this for a very, very long time in spurts. Not all of us have been here for the full 100 years, although it feels like it many days. The other question that I often get is, why do you do this work? Why are you so insistent? Because as you might imagine, I've retired a couple of times now. And what I have to say is that I'm committed to my family of feminists, of my family, my ancestors who believed in equality and worked for it. I always say my hero is my grandfather, who was a farmer in Lowndes County, Alabama. He had 15 children. Always kudos to my grandmother, who actually had the 15 children, but it was an Alabama farming family, and that's the way you did things then. It was my grandfather who decided that his 9 daughters would go to college. The boys, of course, would stay on the farm to run the farm. So the decision was not so much whether the boys would do the farming, but the decision to send my mother and her sisters to college was the decision that changed the arc of our entire family, generations now of people who were able to become educated or to become, solid citizens, active in the world, making contributions because of an education that flowed through the women in our family. And so to honor him, as well as all of these women, my mother and my aunts, and to do this again for my daughter and her children, her son and her daughters, to make sure that we do this for them. 100 years is enough time to wait, to fight, to beg. So thank you so much for being here and having an interest in it. And for those of you who are working for it, it's just, tremendous that you're doing this work. So we've had quite a time. Someone on social media, wrote, I've had my first, my 7-day trial for 2021, and I would like to cancel my subscription because so far, 2021 has been chaotic, troubling. We had a year of that, as you remember, not too long ago. Millions of people were in the streets protesting sexism, racism, with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, charges of racism and sexism, saying that it's inherent in our society. And so it's not surprising to me that a lot of people believe that systemic change is required in America. And that's what the Equal Rights Amendment is about, systemic change. To that point, there is nothing more systemic than the core legal document that dictates our rights and protections, and that's the US Constitution. Now, the framers of the Constitution, who were white, wealthy, mostly slave-holding men, left out a few people for inclusion in rights and protections, the slaves, of course, but also, from this vantage point, the women were also left completely out, along with a slew of other people, the disabled, differently gendered people, different faiths, all of that. If we were going to do, and if we ever do this again, the Equal Rights Amendment that we would have to do would include everything. The one that we're working on just prohibits discrimination based on sex. Knowing that the future might hold some surprises, though, the framers of the Constitution instituted an amendment process, a way to fix the country going forward. And that's the way I look at the ERA. It's a fix. The Constitution has been amended 27 times so far. The Equal Rights Amendment will be the 28th. And while popularly known as the Let's Put Women in the Constitution movement, it doesn't say that actually. It simply states that one cannot be discriminated against based on one's sex. And that seems pretty good policy for everyone on this planet, including this country. And because of the recent Supreme Court decision too on LGBTQ issues, the trans issues, we're talking about everybody. You cannot discriminate based on sex. So there are, nevertheless, we're approaching a century of work attempting to get that fixed into the Constitution. First introduced, as we said before, by Alice Paul in 1923. That was shortly after helping win suffrage for women in 1920. She realized that there was one more thing missing, an explicit statement of equality between the sexes. She would not give up. And she was right about that, because what's happened since then has proven, her theory that we got the vote, but we didn't get what we really needed, and that was fundamental constitutional recognition, but we're going to get it soon. It was almost a half a century later, in 1972, that the seemingly impossible became almost possible. Amending the Constitution is not an easy undertaking. First, it requires 2/3 of Congress to vote to pass the amendment. And miraculously, and I say that from the vantage point of what we know, what Congress is like now, for those who say to us, why don't you just start over? The idea of getting 2/3 of any current Congress to agree on anything is pretty slim these days, but I'm forever hopeful, hoping that will change. So in 1972, 2/3 of Congress, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, voted for the ERA. There was one small wrinkle, however, in the introductory clause of the amendment, not the amendment itself. A time limit of 7 years was placed on getting ratification from 3/4 of the states, the 38 states that we needed. Now, I am told that the insertion of that time limit, although only in the introduction, not on what states would vote on, made Alice Paul, who was still alive to see her dream move forward, cry. I think she knew then that it would cause us trouble, and it certainly has caused us trouble. In addition to the vote in Congress, the people get to vote on an amendment, and so the Equal Rights Amendment began its perilous journey across the country. By 1972, the end of the 7-year time limit, only 35 states had ratified. Now, I think that was amazing, just as I think 2/3 of the Congress is amazing. I think getting 35 states to agree on something is also, to me, amazing, but forever hopeful. But it was extended another 3 years, and we were still 3 short. So that was pretty much where it was left in the 70s and the 80s. And I do want to say a few words of appreciation for the women of the 70s and 80s who fought for the ERA. Of course, Ellie Smeal of the Feminist Majority, Gloria Steinem, Shirley Chisholm, Barbara Jordan, Bella Abzug, Elizabeth Holtzman, who actually got us the 3-year extension. A lot of women, and whose names I cannot, maybe some in this room here, were working for the Equal Rights Amendment in the 70s and 80s and had high hopes for it. We did have some big opponents. Big business, the insurance industry in particular, did not want to see equality. It was a money-making decision on, on their part. There's Phyllis Schlafly too, but I think she gets way too much credit for stopping the ERA. I think it was big business, big insurance that actually got in our way. The ERA movement at that point seemed to fall silent, although there were always activists who were continuing to work for the Equal Rights Amendment. And that, I'm so proud of that. There have always been women and men who said, no, that we're not going to let this go away. But we also went through a period where we thought women were making astonishing progress. And some of you might remember the infamous pipeline theory, that women were in it and that one day we would all emerge fully equal to men in the boardroom, in the science lab, in the White House, although very close to that now, everywhere. And I can remember being a reporter then and getting, then it was the wires you would rip off. I started reporting a long time ago. And then there would be this big announcement, the presence of women in the boardroom is increased 100%, and that would mean I want to put one more woman. So that was the pipeline. It would have taken, I don't know, we still wouldn't be there now. It would take forever before women actually get out of that pipeline and function 50-50 in this United States, where we are more than 50% of the population. We're going to fast forward to the 2016 election. That's a big jump. But, factor in, there were all those years. There was the first woman this, the first woman that, they were taking over in certain areas. And so, of course, we all thought this was major progress and that soon there would be equality. But the 2016 election, was a pivotal point for many in this country. There were the worldwide women's marches, the heartbreaking impact of the Me Too movement, which also generated some justice, some recourse for women who had been silently suffering the sexual pressure in the workplace. There was some progress made on that. And also something began to be heard around that time, and that was a more of an emphasis on the Equal Rights Amendment, with people saying, oh, I remember, the big marches of 2016. I remember when the last time I marched like this, or my mother marched like this. It was for the Equal Rights Amendment, and now women's issues are still requiring massive millions of women to take to the streets to attract attention to the fact that, we're not equal and we need something as specific as a movement for legislation. Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, who, by the way, was one of the founders of the Equal Rights Amendment movement and the coalition with Jessica Neuwirth, they came together and they said, hearing all of these women beginning to talk and men beginning to talk again about equal rights, we needed a focal point. And so they decided that there should be a coalition. We would bring together organizations where we could talk about the Equal Rights Amendment, we could work together, share strategies. And that conversation between Carolyn Maloney and Jessica Neuwirth turned into what is now a membership of over 120, 130. Our goal is a 200 member organization, and we're fast getting there, of national and local organizations representing millions of girls and women and their allies. We have worked on every way forward on the Equal Rights Amendment, including some of you may remember what was then called the 3-state strategy, because we were shy 3 states when we left off in the 70s and, and 80s. And so actually when the coalition started, we were working on the Carolyn Maloney Start Over bill, because we thought there was no hope for this 3-state strategy, because all of the time had gone by, no one had ever heard from, anybody in any other state who was working on anything. But one day in 2017, we had some breaking news. We were sitting in our office. Then we actually, were in an office when news of the state of Nevada came through, that Nevada had ratified the 1972 Equal Rights Amendment. And we, even in the office, were stunned. And we asked our lawyers, does this count? And they told us, well, yes, until proven otherwise, it counts. So as we all know, that was the wonderful Pat Spearman in Nevada who led that fierce move forward for the ratification in Nevada, shocking everybody. And then the next year, Illinois ratified, the ERA did the same thing. We only needed the one more state. It took us until last year, on January 27th of 2020, the state of Virginia ratified the ERA, and we got big cheers, for those of you who were there or witnessed that. It was an incredible moment of progress and of hope and excitement. We had the 38th state, and then we went, to the House, and the House lifted the time limit. Another big cheer. All of that happened in the beginning of last year. We had so many celebrations. Virginia, the House of Representatives, again, fast forward. We came to a screeching halt with the Senate, for which failed to bring up the ERA. The House passed it, but for the bills to actually go into force, they have to be passed by both houses in the same session. So that's where we are. Except remember that time limit. The Trump administration's Department of Justice instructed the archivist, the head librarian, whose job it is to certify, to not certify because of this time limit. And so, of course, things have happened since then. As I've mentioned, we're in court. The attorneys general have sued representing the last 3 states, Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia, have filed a lawsuit compelling the archivist to certify. The ERA coalition is among, your strong advocates here in North Carolina have joined us in the amicus brief supporting them in court. As you know, we have this very, very, very long election. The Biden-Harris administration, very supportive of the ERA, and has committed to seeing it published as the 28th Amendment. And we have a letter going into the president asking for first 100 days consideration to take action with the archivist. And so that is where we are now. I know that Jimmy has a great deal of the story, to tell. What we're saying at the ERA Coalition is that 2021 is the year of the ERA. We need your help. We need your support. And we thank you for it. So that's the not short, longs version of the ERA and how we got here. But we are making progress. Thank you.
Fantastic, Carol. Thank you so much. That was a great overview of where things stand. Like you said, it's not a short story, but you made it as short as you could. So we appreciate that. Well, I want to introduce our next speaker, and we'll come back to Carol at the end to answer some more questions that we got ahead of our town hall tonight. But I want to introduce Jimmy Cochran Pratt. Jimmy is a native of Haywood County. She holds a master's in public affairs from Western Carolina. Jimmy spent her career in higher education, which has a good place in my heart. And she is now retired and works as a community and political activist working for the equal rights amendment ratification since the I had to read that, the 1970s. That's amazing. And she's currently the co-president of the ERA NC Alliance, a fantastic organization. I'll give a plug. Please join as a member if you're interested in this issue. They've been working with us as legislators, the entire time. She's also a member of the League of Women Voters North Carolina ERA Lead Action Team, another great organization, has been super supportive of the ERA. And Jimmy served as the Alliance Vice President, and now, like I said, she's serving as the co-president. So welcome, Jimmy.
Thank you so much, Representative Von Haven. And thank you, Carol, for your thorough outline of the ERA Coalition efforts. We're thrilled to have you with us. Thank you so much. On this past Tuesday night at the Coalition's pre-inaugural event, I was fortunate enough to join a toast to President Biden and Vice President Harris, not only with Carol, but with Gloria Steinem and 1,000 other ERA warriors. It was just so thrilling. And I do encourage you to read Carol's full biography on the ERA Coalition or on Wikipedia. You're going to be impressed. And I found out tonight that we have in common that my grandmother had 15 children, with 13 of them being girls. It's a pleasure to serve as the Vice President along with Lori Bunton of the ERA NC Alliance during this exciting era, that's spelled ERA, in history of the Equal Rights Amendment. I'll be touching on our history, why we need ratification, how you can help us go forward in 2021, and a call for action. And as with any gathering worth having, we will pass the collection plate at the end. We've been working with Hudson McCormick, Senator Van Dyne's legislative assistant, who set up the news conference today, and he arranged for the town hall tonight. So it's like we actually have people on our staff. Thank you, Hudson, for making us look good. We appreciate it. Okay, a little bit of history about the ERA. Carol covered a lot of the national history. But people don't know. The Equal Rights Amendment is a simple 24 words. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. That simple. Occasionally we ask lawmakers if they support the Equal Rights Amendment, and they reply, "I'm sorry, I haven't had time to read it." So we smile and try to give them those 24 words. Since 2015, the ERA has been introduced in every full North Carolina General Assembly. The Alliance is a not-for-profit, nonpartisan group of organizations agreeing ratification of the ERA will improve women's lives in North Carolina and in the United States. We have 13 lead organizations who belong to the Alliance, including the League of Women Voters, NC, National Organization for Women, North Carolina, Women Advance, American Association of University Women, Ratify ERA NC, Business and Professional Women, the Women's Forum, Women North Carolina, and others representing more than 10,000 members statewide. So it's a lot of folks. In 2019, every Democrat member of the North Carolina General Assembly sponsored or co-sponsored the ERA bill. No member of the Republican Party sponsored or co-sponsored. Last year, Equal Means Equal, another fine organization, filed amici briefs, that means friend of the court, in a lawsuit against the National Archivist, as did the ERA Coalition. The Alliance signed on to both, and we are waiting word from the courts. And for those of you who do not know it, the National Archivist has a residence in Durham, and so he's around. He's North Carolinian. The ERA Alliance is part of a nationwide strategy to finally secure the Equal Rights Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. Our other major goal is to work ourselves out of a job because volunteering does not offer much that is very tangible. With so much talent and dedication among our membership, and with each effort and project taken on, We go higher on the technology learning scale, and most of us started at -0. The amazing members living in all parts of the state, in this great big state, and if you've ever tried to drive end to end, you know how big it is. We have several members in the Triad, also in the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area, and an enthusiastic group in Western North Carolina. We have several members who reside on the coast and the Outer Banks, and on any given day, we text each other the weather report on snowstorms and hurricanes and all the weather in between. These people are my friends, for sure. Because of our statewide network, we were able to partner with Vote Equality US to take the notorious RBG, the Ruthless Vote Getter bus, all over the state to advocate for candidates who support equality in this past election. Volunteers in Rocky Mountain hosted the bus first, then sent it on to Raleigh, who packed the bus and gave them lunch and sent them to Winston-Salem, then on to Boone, and then on across the state. We did that a couple of times. It took teamwork and lots of planning on Zoom. After the vote ended in North Carolina in November, we partnered to send the RBG bus to Georgia to get out the vote for equality for candidates we knew who would be on our side. And in that runoff election, because we knew the fate of the ERA in the US Senate depended on Georgia, we wanted to be a part of that. One of our projects we helped fund was distributing books on the importance of voting to underserved and minority youth in rural counties in Georgia. Vote Equality helped change the future of the Equal Rights Amendment with 2 new supportive senators. Along with you and the whole world, we entered the year of COVID-19 lockdown with the question, okay, now what do we do? Our techno nerd members, Virginia Adamson and Audrey Muck, quickly moved us to Zoom for meetings, presentations, demonstrations, tabling, you name it, we've done it. We astonished ourselves how our completely virtual annual meeting ended up with the most attendees in our very short history, almost 90 people. We were very happy. We have done countless, but who's really counting? Visual presentations to organization, political groups, civic groups. Just this week, we have programs scheduled almost every day to spread the good word about the need for the Equal Rights Amendment. The Alliance volunteers have embraced change, and change has lovingly and virtually hugged us back. We meet every Friday with the National ERA Coalition and get to interact with other ERA volunteers all over the United States. One example, to celebrate Women's Equality Day in August, we co-sponsored with the ERA Minnesota to offer a fabulous concert, Face the Music, with well-known musicians and singers. During 2020, we've conducted Zoom meetings with Senators Burr and Tillis and other candidates. In those presentations, the members introduced themselves by stating the numbers of years each of us has dedicated to ratifying the ERA. Most of us have been working on equal rights since 1972, which means that next year we have invested 50 years each in this campaign. Amazing. We are lucky to have lots of members who were not even born in 1972, so we look to them to take us forward to ratification, and we're glad they are on board. This year we have a new Vice President of Legislation, former Senator and Minority Whip Terry Van Dyne, who has introduced the ERA in the North Carolina General Assembly several times during her service. In her volunteer role, she is working closely with the Senate and House members who are with us tonight, and she's done an outstanding job getting legislators to join the ERA Alliance. And we thank you, Terry. Thank you, Carol, for giving us an idea of what is likely to happen in joint resolution in the U.S. Congress. North Carolina residents will have the equal rights under the Constitution. The second, the 28th Amendment, is added, but it's critically important for North Carolina to ratify as a state. Our state did not ratify women's right to vote, the 19th Amendment, for 50 years. We finally did that in 1971. And we cannot allow the ERA, the 28th Amendment, to meet a similar embarrassing fate. So we've got our work cut out for us. North Carolina must demonstrate to its citizens, that's all of us, that legal equality is valued here in our state. Last year, the Alliance zero equal rights. Think about that for a minute. In a press conference earlier today, Lori Bunton, my co-president, shared this information. Before the pandemic, North Carolina women earned an average median income of $8,600 less than men. This suggests NC women will not enjoy pay equity until 2060, and I'm looking forward to that race. If working women were paid the same as comparable men, and I do kind of ask what is a comparable man exactly, the average earnings increase for women would be $6,628, equivalent to a raise of over 19%. And in my work life, I never had a raise of 19%. The increase in earnings would reduce the poverty rate among working women by more than half, while impacting the income of the entire family and North Carolina's overall income. A reason I think that both parties will support the ERA. We can improve the economy of our state. The more states ratifying the ERA, the more it will demonstrate the importance of the issue and the widespread support, which is backed up by poll data. As Carol referred to earlier, over 90% of people support equal rights, and about 85% believe that it's already in the Constitution, which it is not. Discussion and debate of equal rights keeps the topic in the news. North Carolina should be debating the Equal Rights Amendment to send an important message to the state's citizenry, that's hard to say, including students and young adults and elected representatives. Now, here comes the call for action. First thing, and this is based on what Carol has told us in this town hall, is we need to contact Senators Burr and Tillis, as well as our congressman in the House of Representatives, to vote yes on the joint resolution. We'll have more specifics on the number of the resolution so that you can be very specific, put your name in there, thank them for serving, and say, it's got to be now. This is happening fast, and we need immediate action by all of us. The second priority is to, and this comes a little later, we will wait for direction from Julie and Natasha and others. The second priority is to email, call, and write your state legislators to sign on as co-sponsors or support the bill in the General Assembly. It can be short and simple. Please support North Carolina ratification of the ERA. Thank you, Jimmy Cochran Pratt, Asheville, North Carolina. Our web address, which is in the chat, I believe, has information to assist you with letters and phone calls to state legislators and U.S. Senator representatives. If you're shy about calling, and some people are, phone after office hours and leave a voice message of your support for the ERA with your representative. And we've had some night meetings in Asheville about ERA where we gathered about 75 people together, and before they left that night, we made them all place a call to the representative and leave a message. So do that tonight. The ERA Coalition has a complete toolkit to take on important tasks of advocating and lobbying. Just Google ERA Coalition as well as the ERA NC Coalition for the guidance that you might need. Okay, and what else can you do? I know you're asking yourself that. I want to get involved. How can I get busy? First of all, get informed. Know the issue of the ERA. Tell your friends why it's important. Spread the word on social media. Help the campaigns of supportive candidates. Pass a local resolution, and we have all our resolutions for North Carolina posted on the ERA NC Alliance website. Partner with the Chamber of Commerce, as we have done in Asheville and in the Outer Banks. Write a letter to the editor or ask them to be a guest contributor to your local newspaper. Ask us to speak to your group. We've got several volunteers available almost any day or time because we got nowhere to go. We're available. I'm an old Rotarian International member, or old Rotary International member, and I know that Rotary always needs speakers. So we're glad to show up anywhere. Finally, passing the plate, and I would like to have an amen for passing the plate. Please join the ERA Alliance in our efforts to solidify universal human rights. Those are women's rights. Our membership fee is $35 per year. What you would spend on dinner, if one could actually go out to dinner, or dinner for 4 if you dine at McDonald's. We have a sliding scale for any budget. If you prefer to give us a large gift of $5,000 without joining, we will accept that. You will want to be wearing your ERA t-shirt as we cross the finish line for the 28th Amendment. It could be very, very soon. And I want to thank you for giving me your time tonight, and I will turn it back over to our host.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. I love your calls to action. Amazing ideas for everyone on here. So thank you so much. So we're going to do a few Q&A questions, and thank you to everyone who submitted their questions ahead of time. We might not get to all of them depending on how quickly we go through, and we've gotten a few tonight, so we'll just see how it goes. I want to be sure to wrap up by 8 o'clock. That's the Zoom witching hour, 1 hour, and I'm done. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I just wanted to direct the first question to my colleague, Senator Marcus, in that how can we help convince our Republican-dominated General Assembly? How can everyone here, and Jimmy gave some of those ideas, but how can we convince them that the ERA is a necessity for all women, Democrat or Republican?
I'll tell you the kinds of ideas that come to my head, and that is an important goal because at least here in North Carolina, if we don't have Republican support, we are not going to be able to pass the ERA. So that is an important goal. I would say to anyone on this call, if you have a legislator who you don't know if he or she is supporting the ERA here in North Carolina, call and ask. And my guess is if they're of the Democratic Party, they're probably on board, but you want to make sure. And my guess is if they're on the other party, they're at this time either uninformed or disinterested or aggressively opposed. But hopefully it's one of those first two and you can start a conversation. So the kind of language that I would use if I were you speaking to my Republican legislator would be, here is your chance to be a hero. If you pass the ERA, you can claim credit that you got this done for North Carolina women. You can prove that women's equality is in fact part of your party's agenda by doing this one simple thing. So here's your chance. It's too bad we missed the chance to be the 38th state, because that really would have set off fireworks. Virginia took our spot on that. We're a little bit late, but it's still important to do, because the argument that, well, if we pass it at the national level, it's going to pass without the support of North Carolina is really, that's a really bad argument to make, because do we want to have it happen at the national level and have it forevermore be in the history books that North Carolina was one of the 12 states that refused to confirm women's equality? Do we want to be dragged kicking and screaming into a better world for women? We don't want to be on that side of this. That's the kind of arguments I would make to legislators here in North Carolina. And we need to be hopeful. We need to be truthful that the ERA is fairly simple. And it is not a Democratic trick. It is supported by Republicans across the nation. Maybe refer to, there's a man named Steve Anderson, Republican from Illinois. He is one of the most outspoken supporters of the ERA, and he is actively opposed to abortion rights. And yet he encouraged his state to pass the ERA and make some really good arguments that other conservative legislators should be open to. And just tell those legislators, there is a place for them in this movement. We will welcome them with open arms. This is a bipartisan effort.
I love that, Senator Marcus. I mean, just think they could be the hero, you know, of this whole thing if they carried this bill in the House or the Senate.
I'll take
And
my
in
name
fact-
off. They can put their name on if they want, so they can take credit for it. I just want it to pass. I don't need my name on it. You know?
And 4.5 million women would applaud that person. So
Yes.
that, you know, if they want the accolades, that's a good way to appeal to that sensibility. So
Yes.
I love your ideas.
I
Yeah.
have a question that I want to pose to Jimmy.
Go ahead.
Tell us, if you would, Jimmy, why is ratifying the ERA urgent?
I think it's urgent in a couple things we pointed out. We have gotten 38 states. We need to get additional states in case there is a challenge because of the rescission of requested by some of the other states. We don't think legally that will hold up, but we have to take advantage of this moment in time. Time ran out for us in the last Senate. Mitch McConnell did not allow ERA to even get on the desk, even to be read in the Judiciary Committee. So we have to take advantage of the goodwill that has been created with the election of President Biden and Vice President Harris, and the hard work that Carol Jenkins is doing with Jackie Spears and the others to get it out there. That's a big part of it. We just have to grasp this moment of goodwill and go forward and slip it right in there.
Great, Jimmy. Okay, well, my next question is for Carol. And Carol, if we're successful this year, can you give us an idea on like how long it's going to take for this amendment to go into effect and kind of the timeline going forward? Oh, you're muted.
That's a really exciting question, because we believe that the clock started ticking last year on January 27th when we got the 38th state. So that means that all of last year, TikTok, you know, the ERA is moving towards implementation, so that we would only have this year, you know, to go to prepare. The way the amendment is constructed is that it gives a 2-year preparation period. And so that 2 years started, you know, last January when we met all of the requirements for amending the Constitution. So that means that the actual work of implementation would start in 2022. And, you know, the coalition has just drafted its 5-year plan. You know, and when we first started this, everybody thought, let's just get the ERA and then everybody can go home and live an equal life, you know. And then the more we did the work, we realized, no, how are we, you know, who's going to make sure that people are actually implementing the Equal Rights Amendment, enforcing it if we need to do that, examining everything that needs to be changed. You know, one of our coalition members has done it in Arizona. The report they came back with, after 22 lawyers, pro bono lawyers came back, their report is 650 pages long of the things that would have to be changed in the state of Arizona. And so we know that's the federal government, and across this country, many of us think, oh, it's just by accident that women are discriminated against. You know, it's baked in the legislation and the laws, and they all have to be changed, the ones that affect us. So, you know, we're hoping that it happens, that we only have this year, but then there's a lot of work. We'll still need, you know, everybody in this room, you know, to make sure that it actually is implemented fairly.
Thank you. We had a question come in that, Carol, you touched on this subject a little bit in your remarks. So I'll ask either you or Jimmy, whoever wants to respond. This notion of, are we starting from scratch, or are we building on previous states that have already signed on from years ago? Just someone's asking about, to clarify that question for us.
Right. Well, we only needed 38 states based on Article 5 of the Constitution in order to get ratification, in order to meet it. But the coalition is working on a 50-state strategy. We cannot imagine why we won't have 50 states taking a stand for equality for women. It just is not, you know, it doesn't make any sense, you know, in terms of where we are in the timeline of, of things. So, we want a full 50 state. We're not, there are many people who say, well, why don't you start over? The language could be better, because it was written 100 years ago. But if we start over, we really start over. And that means in Congress, the 38 states again. I doubt that many of us in this Zoom room would still be here by the time all of that happened, which is why we want to see this amendment to the finish line. And then we could do whatever else we need to do to make life more equal. But we do want to see this to the finish line.
Great. So you mentioned the National Archivist, and I'm not sure if people understand who that person is and what they have to do with the ERA. Can you explain a little bit more of how that person works? And is that a separate kind of effort versus what you're doing in Congress?
Right. Well, Jimmy, do you want to tackle the archivist or? Sure.
Well, the archivist, National Archivist, is responsible for keeping records of everything that happens in the United States. Yesterday they took pictures of the inauguration, and they will archive those, so they will be maintained. The archivist is the one who takes the amendment when the votes are in, 38 states have ratified, and publishes it in the U.S. Constitution and lets the states know that it's there. So he is a librarian, and he's an archivist too. But that's the thing. It's really a matter of him taking that next step. Biden could order him to forget the Office of Legal Counsel's direction from President Trump's William Barr. I do believe that Mr. Ferriero is going to stay on as the archivist. I have not heard there's going to be anybody different. So it could happen in an instant. And Carol, you may want to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing. It could happen in an instant. Now we had for so many years, a president, a Department of Justice not interested in it. And now we do have an administration that's interested in it. And so it could happen. There is a memo that has to be scrapped and rewritten by the new Department of Justice, but we think that can be done. So no, I always say, I have sympathy for the guy, I mean, I'm sure he didn't really realize, all of the trouble that he was going to be in. And it is supposed to be just a clerical, it's not a judgmental thing that he has. Oh, this is a good state or this is not, it's just simply 38 state, attach it to the Constitution. And he's just been stopped from doing that, but hopefully, he will amend his ways.
So just a question, my question is, so that has to happen first and then the congressional part happens later, or?
Well, no, they're all moving together. We have the court track with the court cases, we've got the presidential movements that are possible. We have Congress, and as I'm reading the resolution, if they do away with the time, with the time limit, then that removes the only argument, left. So, it's conceivable that once they do that, then he can. Well, we don't know which one is going to happen first, but it's exciting to know that it can happen this year.
And I do want to add that it should not prevent us in North Carolina for going forward as swiftly as we can and as thoroughly as we can to get it ratified in North Carolina.
And Senator Marcus, I think our last question was around, you were going to ask about how do we advocate? And I think Jimmy's covered that really well. She's given everyone some really great calls to action. And I just wanted to say, I know we didn't get to all the questions. We had a few coming in tonight, but it is 8:01, so I want to wrap up. If you have other questions, there's so many amazing resources you can go to. I know in the chat, I think that people have been posting the ERA Coalition website, the NCGA Alliance website. Of course, please feel free to email myself or Senator Marcus she put her website and her all her info in the chat. You can find me at Julie for NC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Or you can also email us at our legislative email addresses, which you can find at ncledge.gov. So there's plenty of places. Please make sure if you have questions to reach out to any of us. We'd be happy to answer those. And we're sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions tonight. We had such a fantastic program. Carol, I can't even tell you how thrilled we are to have you with us.
My pleasure. Thank
like
you
everyone
so much.
said, we could read your bio like the whole night and we could all fangirl over you, but I won't do that. But we just want to just thank you so much for taking your time to support our efforts here in North Carolina. And again, thank you to our advocates at NCERA Alliance for all your hard work. The bill will be filed on Wednesday next week, so please watch your emails for that. We will tell you the bill numbers so you can start picking up your phones and typing your representatives to tell them that you want them to co-sponsor it. We only have a very short time to co-sponsor bills, so make sure that you do that right away on Wednesday after we send you that information. And thank you all for joining us. Senator Marcus, you want to say goodbye?
Thank you to all.